the function athletics. And I'm just wondering what are those for? Just in
They're all
general.
the officials or referees for all the different games we have.
Okay, that's what it is. Okay, appreciate it. Thanks. Okay, so if we're, are there any questions from the community? I'm not seeing anything. If I'm correct, I'm not seeing anybody with a hand raised.
I do not see a hand raised either. On my view, it'll pop up to the top, so you're
okay.
good.
So are we good to move this along?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so let's go to the second item on the agenda. Sorry, I'm switching back and forth between my views, which is the purchasing report. And Mr. Lil, I believe you're the next.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Schaffmeister, and good afternoon.
Mhm.
I'll take the first item, pause for questions, and then move to the second of two.
Mhm.
First item is 11 72 passenger diesel rear engine, refer to those as type D flat nose school buses, budget capital reserve. And it is recommended that the pricing from MA Brightbelt Body Works for the purchase of 11 72 passenger diesel conventional type D school buses under Sourcewell contract 063020-BBB, which is shorthand for Bluebird Company, be approved in the amount of $2,220,757, and I can certainly help with any questions.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
I do. I'm looking at, and I see we're getting $1,000 off of our trade-in credit for each bus. Is there, like, at a certain point, if we're only getting $1,000, it almost seems like, couldn't we like cannibalize those for parts on other things? Like, is there more, like, I feel like one part from a bus is probably worth more than $1,000 in most cases. And is there any value in us doing that and saving things that are expensive to replace or might go in some of the other buses that we might have to purchase new or might only need like a year or two before we replace them?
So if we can all keep it on the down low, we do get a lot of the parts off of those buses before they are traded in, because all 11 of these trades are CNG buses, and there simply is no market for, anyone who's in the market for a used CNG bus. So we know full well that basically the frame and the outer body itself is going to wind up being scrap metal. So anything in there like an alternator, these buses aren't going to be put back on the road. Now, one of the things we do have to be careful of is we are obligated to have the buses in a condition where they can be driven away, because if they have to be towed away, then we're on the hook for the towing. So we certainly want to find the right balance.
Why don't we sell it to the scrappers? Because it seems to me a school bus is worth more than $1,000 in metal. Maybe that's just my own fancifulness, but
yeah, I mean, we just don't have the network that, to be in the scrap metal business, if you will. I think it's the point where we recognize, especially with the CNG, we've certainly got our money's worth out of them, and they really have zero residual value.
So basically, the trade-in value isn't a value of anything. It's just basically the value is in freeing up the parking spot for the replacement buses we're getting.
For some of these buses, they're doing us a favor by getting them out of here.
Okay, and we don't give the bus back until we have the new bus in possession, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Are you okay now, Shayna?
I am, thank you.
Okay, thanks. And any other questions from the board?
No.
No, go ahead.
Okay, no questions then. I just want to.
I had a couple of questions.
Okay.
Just so first question is that how old are these buses approximately that we're going to be trading in?
So I always have to be careful because it really should be the in-service date. But looking at the list here, 9 of them are 2015s and 2 of them are 2016, and that's model year. So in order to really answer that, I'd really have to get the in-service date for every single one of those bus numbers. Regrettably, with the CNG buses, we can usually get more years and more mileage out of our diesel buses with the CNGs. And once the tanks start to cause problems and there aren't as many options in terms of repair parts for engines. So we usually can't take those more than 8 or 9 years.
So the life
And
expectancy.
I'm sorry. What I was neglecting to say, keep in mind, we'll still be driving these buses for probably another year, maybe more.
So the life expectancy on the CNG buses is roughly 8 or 9, roughly 10 years.
Roughly. And again, it's, case by case. We have, different models hold up better than others. If we have to replace a transmission on the same bus multiple times, or if, the transmission's been problematic, then, that might move a little higher up on the trade-in list. But, they evaluate every bus because they're inspected twice a year and, maintained regularly. So we know which ones are starting to cause us problems.
What's the life expectancy on the diesel buses that we're purchasing?
Maybe 9-ish. Again, case by case. Some models are, some manufacturers hold up better than others.
But in the industry, it's like 8 or 9 years for these types of buses to last.
Yeah, I think ballpark.
Is it years or is it miles? Sorry, that's a good line, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, there's both factored in. I mean, just going back and looking here at what looking at where we are. I mean, some of these buses have anywhere from 88,000 to 111,000 miles on them that are getting traded in. Now, the mileage is one thing. The other thing is, when we have them out there on the road during snowstorms and they start picking up with that road salt, in regards to the mileage, if the frame starts rusting, then, you're into other issues. But, it's a combination really of, years of service, miles, condition, mechanical reliability, those types of things.
Got it. And then you kind of answered this before, but so if we place the order now, when do we anticipate receiving those buses or switching them out?
When do we hope? I mean, we've had deliveries going anywhere from 12 months to 18 months. Different manufacturers and there's different factors. I mean, at one point there was a UAW strike. Another point, one manufacturer had a fire. The sooner we have them on order, we try to get them in production and go from there.
We
So
have
the
a
lead
current
rate's about
order
12 months.
Sorry, we have a current order in progress right now, right?
2 small buses that we're still waiting on.
And how long ago did we place that order?
I was just looking at that. I think we placed that maybe December. I'm sorry, Vic, go ahead.
Yeah, we placed about a year ago. Anticipation is spring of 25 is when they'll be delivered. So it's almost, 15, 18 months is what we're looking at.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd be in the 12 to 18 month range. I think it's a fair answer.
So the idea is that these buses should be able to last another 12 to 18 months, but obviously because of the lag time, we want to make sure we place the order soon enough so that we're not trying to scramble for buses that break down.
Correct. And, we have fleet replacement that we need to do every year because I think the rule of thumb is you should be roughly 10% of your fleet, replacement years. You don't want to be in a situation where you purchase 60 buses in 1 year because then you're going to have 60 buses age out simultaneously.
Perfect.
So we've avoided that.
And then just the last question is just for the public, where are we coming up with the money for the 2.2, Vic? Would you be able to just provide, this was already approved, correct?
Transfer that to transfer the monies into the cap reserve and to come out of the cap reserve fund.
Great, thank you.
Can I just ask how, when do we pay for this order and how that works in the budgeting cycle? So if we put in an order January 15 for these buses, do we pay for it or some portion of it when we put in the order? Do we not pay until delivery? And would that be money that would be budgeted then in the 2024-25 fiscal year, or is it money that is budgeted for the expected delivery date?
What will happen is we don't pay for the buses until they're delivered here. So there's no money paid by the school district until we receive delivery. We sign off that the buses are operational and all the specs are compliant. So that could be 12 months, year and a half from now, to do that. Since the money is transferred into the cap reserve fund, that was done in the 23-24 fiscal year. I get transferred a separate fund, which is cap reserve. Okay, so that money sits in there. We encumber the funds. Whenever that capital item is received and paid for, it happens in that fiscal year. So it's separate from the general operating fund. So it doesn't matter, like, once the money's in there, what year it comes out of.
Okay, great. Thanks. That was helpful. It can be a little complicated, this multi-year big number budgeting, so I appreciate the clarity.
Thanks. Any more questions from the board?
I do have one question, Mel. This is Kimberly. Just out of curiosity about how many miles per bus are we doing typically?
Well, like I said, the ones being traded in were up around 90,000 to 110. And those buses have been on the road about 9-10 years. So,
No, I'm sorry. I meant like annually. Like, what do we typically do?
Taking those numbers and dividing by 10, you're probably looking at about maybe around 10,000 a year. Now, what's critical here is with a bus, it's not so much the miles, but the number of hours that you have in service. I mean, they're doing a lot of short hops. Some of our buses may wind up on, occasionally be on the turnpike, but you're not going to get a lot of miles put on a bus when it's, at the Lower Merion Depot, picking up children in the Kenwood area, et cetera. And then also our CNG buses don't last as many miles. But it's really the service hours. I mean, the wear and tear. Again, it's a lot of short hops, school to school, stop to stop.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. I just had one question. I know we have the CNG bus. How many CNG buses do we still have in our fleet? And because I know that we have the CNG stations for filling them, and we have to put money into maintaining them every year. And I'm just wondering, once those buses are going, will we be able to get rid of those stations and not have the maintenance funds?
I mean, eventually the CNG market is going to age out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, we probably have close to about 40 or 50 buses that are CNG currently, including these 11 that will eventually be taken out of service. I mean, they are eventually going to sunset because the manufacturers are not building new CNG buses. However, we will continue driving the ones that we own. But we're going to be using those CNG compressors for at least the next 4 or 5 years. Because we still need to keep those CNG buses in use until their eventual retirement.
Okay. Thanks. I appreciate you explaining that. Okay. So are moving along. Are we okay? Oh, I guess we'll go on to the next item of the purchasing report then before we do any approval.
All right. So thank you, Ms. Schaffmeister. The second item is pardon me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. Oh, forget it. Go ahead. I was going to say that
sure.
we can. I'm not seeing anything in chat or any hands raised.
Okay.
No. Okay.
Yeah, they're not on topic. So yes, go ahead.
No, thank you, Ms. LaPere. Item 2, major roof replacement, phase 1. This will be phase 1 of a phase 2 project. Bala Kingwood Middle School budget, capital projects, capital reserve. It is recommended that the pricing from Weatherproofing Technologies Incorporated for major roof replacement project phase 1 at Bala Kingwood, which is areas 1 through 6, 10 through 15, 22, and 26 on the map of our roof, under KPN contract, KPN A as in Adam, 202012-04, be approved in the amount of 3,900,000. Let me start over. The dollar amount was $4,393,100.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Little. Any questions from the board?
I do have a question. This is Kimberly. I see that this says phase 1. How many additional phases and what would be the total cost?
So as I stated, this is phase 1 of 2. This will get the work done in the summer of 2025. There will be a phase 2 in the summer of 2026. And Ms. Garrison, what really drove that decision, or what we came
Zach.
to determine through our due diligence, is the fact that every one of the contractors who looked at this project was very direct in telling us trying to do the entire Balkenwood roof in the one summer, the 10 weeks that are available while the student body is gone, was not really practical in terms of the size of the project. And also there's very, very tight constraints at Balkenwood in terms of laydown area and just maneuverability. So yes, thank you for bringing that up. That is phase one. And phase two is going to be, and we are estimating phase two, again, summer 2026. Those remaining areas, those other numbers, if you will, roughly $5 million for the phase two work.
Does it make sense to approve the contract for both phases at one time? Will that get us any pricing advantage? I know in the past we've been a little jammed up by the inflating costs of building materials, and what we had a quote for 1 year then became like $1 million or $2 million more on a roof the following year. So do we have any benefit, at least even doing it across 2 years, to get the contracts in with the same contractor?
That was part of the conversation, but the contractors are not willing to lock into the pricing that far in advance because of what you just described with the cost. So we could ask to do that, but then they might make it $6 million to hedge their bets, if you will, because of the costs. So
we could ostensibly have a different contractor for the second phase?
Well, it would still be done by the weatherproofing technologies. Now, that means the materials are coming through them. They use different installers. Like they have that consortium, and they always go out to multiple installers to find out who has the best price for that particular work in terms of the installer. But it's all done through that roofing system. Tremco, who's been doing the roofs for us, Gladwin in Penn Valley, because that's one of the benefits of having that consortium.
If they're not willing to commit to a price on us, why are we willing to commit to using their company 2 years in a row?
We really don't have the ability to do that, even if we bid it, because we can bid it and then we'll wind up paying whatever their safety factor is.
No, I understand. What I'm saying is, if you're saying the likelihood is that we will use them again both times, is there any benefit for the second half? Looking and evaluating and seeing if there's a different company that could give us a better price in a year. If they won't commit to us, why should we commit to them?
Very valid. I think that's certainly a valid strategy.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lill, do they use union or non-union?
Under Pennsylvania laws, they're required to use what's called prevailing wage workers, so they could either be union or non-union. But the Pennsylvania Department of Labor Industry has requirements that the skilled trades and any laborers on the project would be paid whatever the union rate is, with also a accommodation in there for the rate for benefits. So we're paying a prevailing wage, which is required under state law.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Sure. So a couple questions with regards to this. My understanding is that the roofs are failing in Balkenwood. What is the stat? Is that accurate? Like, what is the status of the current roof situation at Balkenwood Middle School? And if this is being proposed for the summer, the first half, what are the current processes, or what are we currently doing right now to mitigate that?
So regrettably, with the large amount of flat roof areas that we have in our district or any school district, flat roofs leak. That's just the nature of the animal, if you will. And that occurs in any district or anyone else who has the privilege of owning and operating a flat roof. Balkenwood, we do have areas where we know that the insulation is wet, which is a textbook indicator that the membrane has failed. Now, the fact that the insulation is wet does not mean there's an active leak in the building. However, we do have active leaks in the building. When they are reported, they are put in as a repair order, and they're promptly addressed by our maintenance staff, so that obviously none of these are not catastrophic structural failures of a system. These are leaks. We get leaks sometimes after bad storms through walls. This is an area that we do have, work orders submitted and repairs are performed as promptly as possible. And that's how we've been keeping this roof in service in the interim.
When was the roof installed?
Mr. Pitts, if you could help me out, when was the roof put on at Bauer Kenwood?
2002.
2002.
And how long do the roofs usually last?
That one has a system that's about 20 years, 25.
So we're about 2 years beyond the life expectancy of it, right?
Depending on the particular system that was used back then. I don't have the warranty paperwork in front of me, if you will, and even under a warranty, sometimes the life and performance of the roof sometimes has to do with some of the workmanship. So no two roofs are the same.
No. My question just is that if the roof lasts on average 20 years, or that's the expectation, and we're 2 years behind it, I'm just curious as to why this wasn't planned for last year, and if there's no way to fit all the roof done this year, are we going to have additional costs associated in the next year to fix the failing parts of the roof that we're not having done until 2026?
We have sufficient funds in our operating budget for repairs to any roofs or repairs to HVAC equipment or anything else that breaks. I mean, that's part of our daily operating is when they break, we have to go out and purchase a new pump, a new VFD, a new motor, or any of the roof repair material that makes sure that we don't have active leaks. And if we do, we obviously address them. And if a pump breaks, we fix that as promptly as possible. One of the things that I'd like to remind everybody in terms of the Bauer Kenwood project, I'd kind of like to tie it into a little the chronology. You may recall a program called the DCED, the Public School Facilities Infrastructure Grant. This project, we earmarked this because there was a program of state funding which would make funds available for this type of work, and other districts also apply for roofs and HVAC equipment. So obviously, Mr. Herman, if grant money is available, that obviously increases our abilities to do work if we're getting money from outside sources. The board approved a resolution to apply for that grant. I'm looking at the board motion from back in May. We applied for a grant in the amount of $4,857,000. The limit was actually $5 million per project, so we were pretty close to that. We did not get a response back. As a matter of fact, none of the applicants got a response back until October 22nd. We're supposed to have heard in September, and we actually award was $500,000. So by going through that process, we are able to obtain $500,000 to put towards this roof. Unfortunately, what that does is the application window was back in March and actually closed May 31st. Under that program, districts were not allowed to start working on these projects. If you got too far ahead, you actually got kicked out of the program. There were a couple of districts that actually entered in the contracts and got their applications basically rejected. So part of it was, by going out for the grant money, it does require us to make sure that we move and proceed, and even any type of funding would have to proceed in the proper timeline and sequence.
Is the grant funding offered every year?
I'm not aware. I mean, this was the first year that I have seen it, and I think it's one of those issues where if it's if there's every year they do a state budget, and whether or not they have allocations for every year. I mean, I could only given Harrisburg and different programs they've instituted, it could be a year by year thing. I think that would be the best way to describe it. I know that this year this program provided $175 million to the state as a whole, and they wound up at $820 million of requests. I can't really. I'd be speculating in terms of what programs they may or may not have in any future years.
And that 500,000 would be allocated towards this first project.
Mr. Orlando could explain it better, but obviously it's certainly funding that doesn't have to be factored into the tax bills sent out.
Dick, would that be provided for phase one?
Phase one, when that's completed, we'll have to modify and let DCD know about the modification, and then we'll submit the paperwork, and then we'll receive the funds after we've paid for phase one.
Right. So hypothetically, Jim, what we could have done, I think, is if we really wanted to, we could have done phase one and we could have applied the grant to phase two if we really wanted. I mean, I'm just saying that we didn't have to necessarily, if we're having water leaking in Ballackinwood Middle School, anticipating it, we could have used that 500,000 to phase two potentially instead of phase one. Are there any other roofs in the district that are reaching to the point of where they're hitting their the expectancy of when they need to be replaced?
So we do have roofs, and we have an overall plan, 5 years, 10 years, even 30 years out. And again, age is not the only definitive or determining factor. The roofs at our high schools were installed as EPDM. They have somewhere roughly a 15-year lifespan. We've had no problems with those roofs. I did see a comment in the chat that someone owns a commercial roof with no leaks. We have 2 of those as well. Harriton and Lower Merion have performed very well since they were brought online in 2009 and 2010. However, it's like everything else. There is an expectancy. The EPDM roofs, it's a membrane type of roof. Those are roughly 15-year roofs. I put a shingle roof in my house 20 years ago, and it's supposed to be a 30-year shingle, and I'm going to be in the market for a roof at my house. It all depends on, how well it's holding up. Harriton and Lower Merion are holding up well, but, from a fiscally responsible standpoint, we're anticipating that there'll be costs to restore those roofs in the upcoming years.
So if we're hitting the point of where the expectation is that it's at that life expectancy, are they on the calendar for either this 2025, the summer of 2025 to have those done? Or is there an expectation as to when, just so that we can get ahead of it and we anticipate it so that we don't have leaks or we don't spend additional funds to Band-Aid the issue and we can actually address it?
So currently, and this goes back to the capital project plan that was presented to the board back in March, Harriton, which is the building that opened first and went online first, that would be summer of 2027. And then Lower Merion, which is a year younger, if you will, that would be summer of 2028.
So that's like 2 or 3 years beyond the life expectancy of them. Should we be anticipating these issues sooner? If we're already hitting our life expectancy, shouldn't we do the work before we have failures, as opposed to, since we have a tight budget of, not a tight budget, but a time period of when we should be performing this work, which is only over the summers?
We can certainly perform projects that are approved and funded in any given timeline that's available.
Jason, my concern about that is that we're not certain when that will happen. Like, you don't know exactly when you'll need that leak. And so that roof, excuse me. And so if you replace it, like, you don't know if you're going to replace it just before it starts to go or 5 years before it starts to go. And if you replace I don't know, I assume since BC is a $9 million roofing project, that the high schools are probably about 10 at least, then we're spending this major chunk of funding earlier than we would necessarily. And so I don't know that it's necessarily a bad idea to plan it for a couple years out and do routine maintenance. It's not like the kids are sitting outside with no roof at all. Like, these are things that are getting fixed. It sounds a little dire when we say when there's like a catastrophic failure of the roof. It needs to be replaced. And so I think doing it on a schedule makes sense. And it's probably a really good thing for us to talk about in the finance meeting next month.
I think finance is coming up, so we should explain it. I think it's just that if you look at the life expectancy, and since we can only do it over the summer, we need to, I agree, we need to anticipate, but we also have to be realistic as to when potentially the expectation is of these roofs are going to survive till. And sometimes waiting till the last minute, we're in a position like we are now, where now we're doing the renovations over this summer, and then we're waiting a full another year to do the rest of it. And it's not routine maintenance. We're spending tens of thousands of dollars so far in patching up the roofs. My understanding is where that money could have gone towards potentially the new roof. So we're just doing patchwork to fix the water that's coming in, as you know, because of the fact that these roofs are hitting their beyond their expectation.
Right.
But,
But even if you think about scale, if you're thinking about a $20,000, let's say you're saying tens of thousands of dollars, let's imaginarily make it up as $20,000 versus a $10,000 roofing project, that is proportionally, it's not as major of a percentage as it could be. It's not. I mean, we obviously kind of disagree on the wisdom of the planning here, but just in terms of this, I will just say, just in terms of this project, I think it is good to approve the way we have it.
Yeah. I mean, in the past, this is Melanie, in the past, we have been doing a roof just about every summer to meet the needs of the roofing projects that are in the 5-year, 10, Jim, as you said, the 5, 10, and even 30-year plan. So sometimes hindsight is always, as they say, 2020, and this one went maybe just a year out further. But for most of they've been getting to the roofs before it gets to this point.
Correct. We had Gladwin that was done in the summer of 2024. First couple of months, they find a few leaks here or there, but they've been, addressed by the contractor. So the Gladwin roof has been resolved, and that is a large roof. Penn Valley was done in 2023. And even though these are, smaller buildings, maybe square foot wise, if you picture just the size, the footprint, Penn Valley and Gladwin are pretty large one-story buildings that span a pretty big footprint, which means it's a lot of roof area.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So is there any more questions from the board?
nothing else.
Okay. I'm not seeing anyone with just a reminder to everybody, if you put a chat in, you need to state your name and where you live in Lower Merion. Not your address, just where, generally where you live.
We do have one, I think, that's on the topic of the playgrounds, and the person enter their name at the end there.
Was that Kim Lipset?
Yes.
So the question is, can anyone explain what school board disagrees on, as Shana just referenced? I turned in late, so maybe I missed it, but what is in disagreement? It's the scheduling of when a roof is done, and trying to, should roofs be done based upon a cycle of when it's expected that it's to last, versus looking at trying to assess the how well done is the roof versus, and maybe getting a couple more years out of it. And should it be is patched, so that maybe you need a couple of patches versus doing a new roof early and using the
I don't think it. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily early. I guess my point was that if the life expectancy of a roof is 10 to 15 years, and we're already beyond 15 years, my thought would be, in the world of construction, is that we should make every effort sooner than later to get that roof on the capital improvement list and done, because we've already exceeded it, even if the roof doesn't show that it's failing immediately, because you're beyond the expectation. And, I think giving it some more time, even though it might look okay right now, since we can only do it over the summer, I think that's something that we need to keep in mind and look at. But yeah, I think this is one of those crossovers where maybe we should be, we can work with the finance department, the finance committee, to kind of map that out and see. I just don't want to be in a position where reactive instead of being proactive when we've hit life expectancy already.
Mr. Orlando,
you know.
what month is, or what date is the finance committee that's scheduled to discuss facilities? Do you know?
I think they start in December, don't they?
They do, but each
Yeah,
one
but
has a
there's different
specific
topics
topic.
for each one.
There's different topics. Are you talking in the budget process meetings?
Yes.
That was sometime March, April of 25.
Okay, so when that is going to be one of the upcoming meetings, could we try to just remind this committee so that if anybody who's not on both of those committees wants to be a part of that, we can make special effort to attend that finance committee that has that crossover.
Just one other question. Sorry, going back to this. On Harridan and Lower Marion, have we had an inspector come in or someone from the company come in to assess how much more time we have on those roofs? I assume that they can take a look at the quality of it and make a determination as to, whether or not you have 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years.
There's technology available out there. I've been in many instances and over the course of my career, I've hired companies to do what they call infrared scans. And that will tell you like where some wet spots might be, particularly if it's in the wet insulation. I'm looking into some different independent companies that have that technology and also that expertise. Where I want to be careful is I want to make sure we're getting an independent assessment. I don't necessarily want to get a roofing company trying to sell a roof, for lack of a better term. I would like to, get that arranged in terms of having someone not only do a visual, but also the infrared allows you to see things that you can't see with the naked eye, and that's something we're pursuing.
But from the weatherproofing, when they came and they looked at those two roofs? Have any of the roofing, like has weatherproofing technologies that you said we've been using, and they're doing the Balkanwood Middle School? Has anyone in the last year, 5 years, 10 years, has anyone looked at the Harridan and Lower Marion roof that's an expert to give us an idea as to just visually, or that's not something that we've done or that they're able to do?
We've done it on different roofs. I just would have to look at my records to definitively state a specific roof had an infrared inspection on a certain date. I just don't have that in front of you. And nonetheless, even if you did the inspection, say you did an infrared a year ago, there may not have been a leak there. It could possibly be there a year or two later. So I think what I believe, and I think we're in agreement, this would be a very good time for an assessment, an independent assessment, I would suggest, of the Harridan and Lower Marion roof, and the technology exists, and we just have to make those arrangements to get that done, both visual and infrared. And I could certainly look to see what we have from prior years, but again, that always runs the risks of the fact that it's not current.
I'd also like to know the price before we do that, just because if it's an exorbitant amount of cost, I'd rather put the cost towards actually doing the roof as opposed to giving us information that we probably already know since it's already past its expectation, the expectation date. So I think that would be helpful to have.
If you find a inspector or contractor, we'll update the board on what the cost is before we proceed.
Great, thank you.
There is one more comment that's roof related in the chat. Someone say Amanda Colbert. I'm sorry, I don't see a location, but it says I have a flat roof on my property and we installed rubber roofing and haven't had a leak since. We tried to fix failing parts of the roof, but the problem wasn't solved until we changed the roof material.
So Ms. Buckman, I actually addressed that earlier during some of my comments and acknowledged that comment. I believe what that individual is describing when they say rubber roof, that's typically EPDM. EPDM is the material that we've had at Harridan and Lower Marion, which, as I said, since those schools opened, those roofs perform very well. So yes, there are EPDM roofs that are certainly well installed and hold up and perform. But again, everything does reach, as Mr. Hermes pointed out, everything does eventually reach end of life. Different roofing systems, different types of techniques, and even different types of roofs. We have some schools where it's not just one great big flat roof. There's different levels and layers and parapets and skylights and things of that nature. And, that's, again, more seams and flashing and all kinds of other techniques that are in there. But yes, there are rubber roofs that will hold up, and I think Harrington and Lower Marion are good examples. But again, that's not going to, continue indefinitely.
Before we move on, I think that there might be some people in the waiting room. Could we just make sure that there's no one in the waiting room that's waiting to be let in, please?
They're all in.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Sorry.
Yep. That's good.
Okay. So if we have nothing further asked, we will continue with the budgeting and stuff to look at the way that roofs are considered for replacement. But in the one at hand right now and the school buses, are we okay to move forward the purchasing report?
Yes, thank you, Melanie.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so next item on the agenda is district contracts. That's Ms. Fraser.
Good afternoon. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thank you. So only two for student services this month. The first one is, they are both renewal contracts. They, for everyday speech. We started using everyday speech actually in 2020. It's like a COVID keeper. It was a resource that we were able to identify that was allowing us to deliver services virtually when we needed to. This is an instructional tool that our speech and language therapists utilize. And they have since expanded the scope of what they offer through this tool. So again, it's an instructional tool. It's for K-12 students. Works on pragmatic language, which is like language we use in social settings and the application of that. And then they've also expanded to use a lot with social emotional learning. So our special education teachers also use this as a resource for social skills instruction. And it aligns with the CASTLE framework, which we've talked about publicly before, which is the social and emotional learning. The Snap and Read is also a renewal. It is been in use for a long time by the district. This is a tool that supports students with accessibility. So there is the co-writer piece of it, which is the language output. So it's writing. So there's like word prediction tools with it. And then there's the receptive language part, which is the tools for reading, read alouds, it allows us to have students who need this based on their disability to access anything electronically. So if we have an electronic resource document, a book, a website, these tools are used for those students to be able to access. It is per individual student need related to their needs for assistive technology.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the board?
Is the contract a license, sorry, Kim, a contract for a license per student, or is it a purchase for the license for the district to use?
Yeah, so for everyday speech, it's a license for staff because it's an instructional tool, not a student.
Per teacher?
So per license, right? So we have it so that we have two per school, and then staff can share that resource. And then the Snap and Read co-writer is based on student enrollment, and it's based per student.
Okay, so those numbers, this
Are
is
all inclusive of what we need.
Right, but this is based on our enrollment for next year, or
So
how
these are based on currently the use that we need it for this, because this particular contract, it's a renewal. This
Right.
October to October. End of October to end of October.
Okay, and this is not about this specific one, but just in general with contracts like that. What happens if it's just for the like text help one? What happens if we have 10 more students or 10 fewer students that need it next year, and when they enroll, that number changes mid-year? How is that handled?
Yeah, the companies in student services, when that happens, like they do estimates and they understand that there's going to be fluctuations, so it's built into the cost.
Oh, okay. So the cost won't
maximum
change
amount
whether
the district would expend. Yep.
I'm sorry?
This is the not the maximum amount the district would expend, and the companies work with us.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Are there any other questions?
Just one quick question. I know it's a renewal, but does this also include some sort of training to our staff to make sure that they're familiar with the this specific product and the platform and how to use it effectively and efficiently?
Yeah, we actually have a coordinator for special education that's an assistive technology coordinator. She helps to support with any staff training that's needed. She's a speech and language therapist by trade, but has been in that coordinator role for assistive technology.
Great, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Any other questions? I see, if not, I see one question in from Michelle McGill in Bala Cynwyd. Said Snap and Read is necessary for some children. It's a game changer for some children and fosters a level of independence necessary for success. It helps children to be able to participate in lessons without the need to request assistance in gen ed classes. Thank you, Michelle, for that.
Yeah, we appreciate the feedback.
Yeah. So if there's no, are we good to okay, are you
this?
are we good to move forward?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kimberly, for your joining us. And I think we're good to move on to the next agenda item. Hello,
I think that's me. So good
Eric
afternoon.
Stoifman. Yeah, Eric Stoifman. Sorry, I was trying to get. Okay, thank you, Ms. Hanks.
So our very long-term school physician retired recently, and so this is a request to ask the board to hire a new school physician, Dr. Soiferman, and his company, Liberty Urgent Care. We're working through the contract right now with Whistler and Dr. Soiferman. The position is mandated by the school code, so it's a position that we are required by law to have. The primary services that the school physician provide are standing orders for all of our district school buildings, consultation with district staff in probably the student services and HR departments primarily on an as-needed basis, physicals for new hires, and our annual PennDOT physicals for our bus drivers. So those are the primary areas. With Dr. Bryan's retirement, we're restructuring this a little bit, and Ms. Frazier and I have separated some parts out from what Dr. Bryan did. So, we're asking that the board approve an agreement so that we can get started again with a new school physician.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hanks. Any questions from the board?
Yeah, so it says $15,000 annually. So I assume it's a part-time, or is that just a standing for a period of time until you get the contract? Because I thought there was a post for like a position for a doctor that was well over 100,000. I think it might have even been closer to 200,000. Can you just walk us through? Is this?
I'm not sure what posting you're referring to at that amount. This would be $15,000 annually. Would include the services that we require, or that I stated before. Because we were doing a little bit of restructure, I think it will be a little bit of a learning process. And so, if there's any changes to that fee, we'd be coming back to the board with that information. But right now, we think that that's where we'll be, and it's an incredibly fair price. Dr. Soiferman is a resident. He's committed to helping the district out in this role, and we're very, I think, fortunate to have that.
Sorry, when you say resident, do you mean resident doctor or resident of the district?
Resident of the district.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I had that same question. Is there any other questions? Then I have one. I just wondered, was the last doctor also a contracted similar to this?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so if there's no further questions, I'm not seeing anything in the chat, or any hands raised. Denise, I'll check with you because I'm not sure if I can see them.
I do not see anything else.
Okay, great. So are we okay to move this forward?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you all.
Yes.
Thanks. Okay, the next item is the Presidio Cisco SmartNet renewal, and I believe Mr. Catalano, hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly because you're new to, welcome to the district, and thank you for joining us for the first time.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Yes, you said it correctly. I appreciate it. Thank you. This is a renewal of our SmartNet, which is a comprehensive support for our Cisco network gear software and our voice over IP phone system. This coverage with SmartNet includes technical support for issues for our 24/7, 365 support model, hardware replacement, software updates, including bug and security patches, and online technical resources. This is broken down into 4 contracts. One is Identity Service Engine, which helps us with our authentication and network security, hardware support, software support, and then finally for our phone system. These are all on the CoStar's bid protected pricing to make sure we can get the best pricing available. And coincidentally, we're saving a little over $3,000 this year with the renewal with the contract pricing.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board?
Just a welcome. We appreciate you joining the team, and I have no questions about this.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very happy to be here. Everything's been wonderful. I appreciate you having me.
Okay, thanks. If that's no, are there any hands raised? I've not seen any comments in.
Not on the topics.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Then are we okay to move this forward?
Yes.
Shayna?
Yes. Sorry, I had to unmute myself.
Okay, thanks. I believe is Kimberly Garrison on the call still, or has had to leave?
No, she did have to drop off.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm not looking. And so that brings the end of the agenda items. Now we have some questions that have arose. Seems like there's
Sorry, Kimberly just came back.
Oh, Kimberly came back. Okay.
She told me she was going to try to come right back, so she is back.
Okay. Welcome back, Kimberly.
So before we get to the comments, I would like, I know that last month we talked about, I would like an update on the playgrounds. I think that we were going to get from Jim and from the administration, as well as also an update on the field between Kinwood Elementary School and Val Kinwood Middle School.
Yeah, and a lot of the questions that are in the chat are about having accessible playgrounds in the district that meet the needs of students with disabilities, especially those in wheelchairs. So yeah, to have an update would be nice.
So let me take those one by one. And Mr. Herman, I know you had specifically asked about opportunities to update or revise the grass field and also that gravel track that that currently exists between the Kinwood and Bow Kinwood buildings, down in that area. We had provided you with some budgetary pricing that regrading and updating the drainage and other aspects for that field. That would be a total project cost of approximately $300,000 to $400,000, and then constructing I'll call it a synthetic, an all-weather track similar to the surface that you would see at Harriton or at Lower Merion or even Blackrock. Again, in order to construct that and put it in and get it to that type of surface, which would eliminate the gravel. That would be an estimated cost of about $450,000 to $550,000. So that would be a project somewhere in the $750,000 to $950,000 range. Now, the other thing that we've reported back to you, Mr. Herman, is there is no opportunity to put a 400-meter 6-lane track in that area. That track would extend into Bryn Mawr Avenue. As a matter of fact, I looked at it again. We'd actually have part of the turn into 2 houses on Bryn Mawr Avenue. So unfortunately, it appears that that odd-shaped gravel track that's currently there was very much dictated and limited to the fact that Manioc Road's on the one side, Bryn Mawr Avenue is on the other. So there just simply is no way physically distance wise to get a, full 6-lane, 400-meter track.
Is that only if we keep the standard shape? If we keep the standard length, but not the standard shape, is it possible to fit it in that space?
It's the length that gets us.
Okay.
Are we
we would-
restricted by width?
No, but what happens is you make it narrower, it's just going to get longer. If you try to make it thicker, you basically have what you have now.
Okay.
There simply just is not enough room to accommodate both axes of that oval. Either the long
But it would
axis
still
or,
be under consideration putting in a different surface, even if it's not to the standard measurements, correct?
and that's where when Mr. Herman inquired about this, we would have to make sure that we understood what implications, improvements, or maybe even, cost, or I'm sorry, benefit or possible limitations that it might impact on the BC track program, which is a very heavily used program. I mean, we want to make sure that whatever gets put in, if we're getting into a different type of track, then we've now kind of moved the discussion to the grade level and the community uses it and things of that nature. So there is a significant cost there that, given the constraints and other requirements for facilities across the district, there are no plans to embark on that project or put any bids out on the street anytime soon.
So,
Mr. Herman, you can tell me if I stated that incorrectly.
No, I really appreciate the update, for the community and the information. I think that, again, this is my own personal opinion. I don't know, Shayna, Melanie, Kimberly, what your thoughts are, but I think that this was a lot more expensive than I think anticipated to revise, to handle the field and the track. I agree. I think it would be really, I think putting it out to bid or going through those efforts or those costs at this point, I think would be a waste of money. I would suggest at this point, with all this information, maybe it would make sense to speak with the principals at both of the schools, have a conversation with the track program, involve the community, and get a better understanding of the needs of all the different players involved in this field and in this track, so that we have a better understanding of what options are available, and then we could potentially get additional pricing based on that, and then go back to the board with some sort of a recommendation. But I think at this point, it would be helpful maybe to involve those other people involved in, that would be using the track, the community, Ballacue Middle School. Stakeholders. That's the word I was looking for, Shayna. I think getting that information might be a helpful addition to the information, so that we could figure out what the best use of this space would be.
No, Claire, are you talking only about the track, or are you talking about the grass field as well?
I'm sorry, Jason. My bad. I apologize.
What was the question, Melanie?
Oh, I just wondered, are you talking about just the track itself, or the grass field? Because I understand that's a whole other problem with the.
Who, me?
Yeah.
I'm saying that the field itself, to renovate and to make it so that we don't have as much of an issue with the drainage. The numbers are roughly, and give or take, is 300,000 to 400,000. Jim had said, and then it would be about 450,000 to 500,000 for the track. So I think both of those are a lot more than I anticipated. So
not me. Not me. I was about bang on what I think under $1 million. That sounds about right.
I mean, listen, either way, I think if we're going to embark on the cost associated with that, especially with the limitations on the track, I think it might be helpful to bring in, and to speak to the different stakeholders that are involved in this, to get a better understanding of how we can meet everyone's needs before embarking on, almost $1 million worth of renovations for that space. That would be my recommendation.
And Mr. Aftermeister, again, my apologies to Mr. Herman for kind of jumping in there too quick. Your question was, could we maybe renovate that field and address the drainage there, and just, to bring the track and, kind of look at the tracks a longer term. The problem is the two of them are really married to each other. We don't want to regrade the field and then basically create a low point and flood out a track and have that submerged underwater. And, on the other side, if we redo the field and then the entire track is draining onto it, we're going to have a field with a lot of water and some gravel draining into there. So, they have to be, regardless of the level of improvement, that the whole drainage is affected by everything that's in between those two buildings, which is primarily that track and that grass field, and they're married together because everything slopes the directions that they do. And again, my apologies, Mr. Herman, I didn't mean to jump in there.
No.
I'll jump in now. I frankly wasn't surprised by those numbers. They are big, but they're not especially thinking back on what we were quoted, sort of estimated when we got the playground presentation in October, that it seems kind of reasonable for a space that size. I know we had discussed potentially talking with the commissioners about their participation in this project, since it is a really heavily used area by community members. I know it's right near me. There are lots and lots of people that make use of that track on a regular basis. I don't know if that's happened or not, but I think that could be a really good avenue for us. Yeah.
We've had some very preliminary conversations. I mean, obviously we were kind of doing our homework, and Ms. Kels, actually, thank you for bringing that up because I wanted to tie back. You probably recall that there was a company, Chester Valley Engineers, that we had the board approve in order to do survey work, which they've completed. And if I'm not mistaken, Ms. Cash, I think Chester Valley may have appeared on 2 subsequent agendas because we kind of added on
right
to their scope.
We did the field, and then we did the add-on of the track.
Great, thank you, because that tells me my memory's accurate, or someone's backing me up at least,
or either that or we're crazy together.
So, in speaking to Mr. Herman earlier, because we really recognize that, the original thought concept there of having a 400-meter track and things of that nature, rather than expending more and more of their engineering hours and then basically having engineering fees that would more or less be abandoned design, for lack of a better term.
Right.
Both of the points that you're making, both you and Mr. Herman, it would be better to put a pause on getting into like really, really detailed drawings until there's more conversation about what is the best combination of utilization at the elementary school level, the middle school level, the community level, and the constraints of 2 buildings and 2 roads that aren't going anywhere. We really, I don't want to say go back to the drawing board, because that's not, we're not sending Chester Valley back to the drawing board. I think we have to go and explore those avenues before, we do have abandoned design and engineering fees for something that, is still somewhat, we're still doing the due diligence.
And
now that we have those numbers, Sheena, we can also, at our next meeting with the commissioners, I can bring that up. It was kind of just getting those hard numbers so that we had a better idea of that. I think the other thing is, and this is similar to the playground discussion, there might also be grants out there that we could potentially, avail ourselves to. So that's another avenue, that we can explore.
And I mean, just for my board colleagues, and I will say this to the board writ large when we have a chance to, and possibly in finance, that I know that there's different things that go into prioritizing one project over another. But I wanted to remind everyone that this particular area of land, this field and track, is one of the very few spaces, if only, or possibly the only space in our district that is conjoined between 2 buildings and equally used between 2 schools. So if $900,000 would seem too much for one school, would we consider $450,000 too much for one school 2 times? Because that's kind of the way I'm thinking about it in terms of the expenditure, is that it's not just this is the space for Kinwood to have recess, or this is the space for BC to run their track team. This is a space that has high community use, has very high elementary school use, and has very high BC use. Like there's just a lot more stakeholders, if we're using our buzzword today, in this group for this particular project. And that is my soapbox, and I will step back down.
No, I listen, I agree with you 100%. I'm just curious as to maybe, maybe the Kinwood administration, the Bala Kinwood Middle School administration, maybe since you're essentially redesigning the whole space, right, for that kind of money, maybe there's input that they would have that they would like to see as well. Maybe the track, team would like to see something different. I don't know. I'm just saying that if we're going to go through essentially redeveloping all of that space, having, maybe there are things that they have always wanted that, that we don't know about.
I imagine that's a little further down the line, more towards what Mr. Lill was talking about in terms of the design process. That I think if what we know is that we want this project done, then we need to work within the constraints of how the district administration and how the board function in our budget processing and our budget process and our project prioritization, and sort of weigh that. And then once it becomes, yes, this is a thing that we're going to do, then that's a really great time to look to the community and the stakeholders and the people who are going to use this space on how best to design it and get our final input on that.
Yeah, I think both sets of comments are very, very helpful. The assignment that we were given was what would it cost to upgrade and address issues, and I think we started with the paradigm of based on it, the configuration and layout that exists today. I mean, if that was a $95,000 conversation, it'd be a different story. But obviously, with $950,000, there's going to have to be developments of Plan C, D, and E. But I think we have at least been able to do the homework on, what would it take if we were to do it as is, where is, but different services or better grass. Now I think we can go into some of these alternatives. But thank you both.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I think both good points. My only concern is that that's the only field for Kinwood and it's wet a lot for them to not be able to use it. So it would be something that we need to take into consideration as moving forward, but agree we need to getting input is the best way to move forward. Okay. So,
Jim, sorry, Mr. Lill, could you provide an update just also on the playgrounds, please, as to where we are?
No, before we begin,
Oh, sorry.
we have a lot of comments in the about playgrounds accessibility in our comments here. Do we need to read those aloud? Or I'm not sure or can we just say there's a lot of comments in here?
Well, I was hopeful that maybe Mr. Lill could provide like an update as to where, because it's been, I think, 2 months since we've done an update on it, where we are. And then we can go through the questions and see if he's answered. I anticipate with an update, maybe he'll answer the majority of them, and then we can ask those specific questions that haven't been answered.
Yeah, most of them are just a general. I'm supporting this, so I'm trying to clarify. Are we required to read each comment individually?
Ms. Schaffmeister, as Mr. Herman suggested, and I'm I'm just suggesting here. I've read all comments here. I've been reading them as it's going along, so I've seen every one of them. And as a global response, we recognize and value the fact that accessible playgrounds and appropriate playground equipment and keeping these playgrounds properly maintained and updated. There's no question that that's a critical function of any school district, and certainly any school district that has elementary schools. Playgrounds are an integral part of an elementary school property, and the accessibility is something that we have to address. It's not something that we don't acknowledge. So again, if there's a desire to read every comment, I hope maybe in terms of an overall response, I mean, there is no disagreement in terms of the value of playgrounds and the value of accessibility. Ms. LaPera, what's your advice?
Yeah, I think we should read them. Sorry, I think we should read them because the recording is being recorded and the comments will not be recorded as part of it. So if someone in the future wants to watch the recording, they won't be privy to the actual comments. So my suggestion would be is to read them so that they're part of the actual
Is it possible
Recording.
to capture the chat and have that published on the website with the recording?
Yes, I can probably do that. What I was going to suggest was when I do the meeting minutes, it will list every single person's name to put a comment in chat and what their chat was in reference to. So it would be forever recorded in the meeting minutes, where as opposed to a recording that we place on our website is only there for 30 days. So either way, they can be read or I can record them for eternity in the meeting minutes.
You can do both. Doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, either way, Amy, have
I'm
at
happy
it.
to read the comments that are in the chat for people who have provided their names and where they live in the district. The first one is from Sarah Garner of Ardmore. I am checking on the status of accessible playground renovation. This person did not leave where they live in the district. Amanda Cobert of Wynwood. I'm here as an LMSD parent advocating for playgrounds to be accessible as a mother to a neurotypical and neurodivergent child in Lower Merion. I can't stress how important it is that all children have the ability to play together. Both neurodivergent and neurotypical children have so much to learn from one another. I am happy to help in any way possible. Please feel free to contact me. And she lists her phone and email. This person also supports accessible playgrounds, but didn't have a location. Risa Murphy of Bryn Mawr. I also echo the need for usable playgrounds. Last time I asked the board to investigate the amount of indoor recess days at Welsh Valley. Reported they stated 10 per year. This is false reporting on their end, as my son has reported. They have stayed inside for the past 2 weeks, which is 8 days just in this month. I would like to verify they are in fact keeping written track of this, as well as recording the reason for staying indoors. If their playgrounds are too hazardous to use for most of the winter, parents should know this and fields should be improved. It's another comment with no name or location. Jennifer Rosner Gladwin. I would like to leave a note in support of for the accessible playground renovation so that all children, both disabled and non-disabled, are able to play together. This is so very important for children with disabilities so that they can have the chance to play with their friends and not be excluded. Emily Zoltik from Ardmore. I'm the parent of a Penn Valley student. I recently learned that none of the school playgrounds in LMSD are wheelchair accessible. All students in the district should have access to the school playground. Are there any plans to renovate any of the school playgrounds to make them accessible to all students? Josh Cobert of Wynwood, highly supportive of wheelchair accessible playgrounds as part of LMSD. This is a table stakes expectation so that all kids could play. So another comment without where they live in the district. Jenna Oberlander of Penn Valley. I am strongly supportive of ensuring that all LMSD playgrounds are inclusive and accessible for all students. Every child deserves the chance to play with all of their peers. Elizabeth Yum of Penn Valley. I also wanted to just send a note in support of wheelchair accessible playgrounds. Playgrounds are such an important part of the elementary school experience, and it would be wonderful for differently able children to have access to the same facilities and for other children to better learn how to intelligently navigate differences with others. Jed Bergman of Penn Valley. I am strongly supportive of making sure that all LMSD playgrounds are inclusive and accessible for all students. All children benefit from this in so many ways. I was surprised and disappointed to learn that this has not already been addressed. My sincere hope is that this project gets prioritized and rectified immediately. It is a fundamental right of all of our children to have equal access. Thank you. Jennifer Chen of Penn Valley fully agreed with accessible playgrounds. Surprised this has not already been implemented. I doubt there is anyone who doesn't support this. Okay, that was previously discussed. Lori Daly of Ardmore. I am attending this meeting also because of learning that none of the district's playgrounds are handicapped accessible. That just seems unacceptable in 2024 in LMSD. I feel that whatever fix is needed, such as replacing wood chips with ground rubber mats, should be something added into the budget as soon as possible. While it's a shame that it takes parents of children who need this to access all area playgrounds to bring it to the district's attention, I would hope the response would be swift and appropriate for all children, so no further action would need to be taken that leads LMSD being in any other lawsuit. As a taxpayer and parent who's been in the district for 12 years, I look forward to hearing a resolution on this. I think this question I'm about to read goes back to the roofing discussion from Kim Lippitz of Narberth. Is there agreement from the board on this or no? I agree. Otherwise, are we spending money on quick fixes, which cost the district more in the long run? Carla Almo of Bryn Mawr, I am also advocating in support of LMSD moving forward to approve fully accessible playground renovations within the school district. Also from Kim Lippitz of Narberth, can anyone explain the priority about accessible playgrounds for elementary schools given the pushback on this agenda we saw at the last regular school board meeting? I am confused by why there was such pushback from school board member Ms. Shurak, but can someone explain this? What is priority on this? What project was Ms. Shurak advocating ahead of elementary playground accessibility? That was unclear at the last general school board meeting, so I'd appreciate clarity about which project Ms. Shurak wanted to see ahead of playground accessibility. Thank you. Another comment from someone without an address in the district, another comment without a name or address in the district. Michelle McGill of Ballackinwood. Snap and read. So this is back to that, is a necessity for some children. It's a game changer for some children and fosters a level of independence necessary for success. It helps children to be able to participate in lessons without the need to request assistance in general education classes. Okay, this is a comment without a location in the district. Michelle Vessel of Gladwin, about another topic. Since the controversy over Arnold Field lights has been resolved and it has a green light for lights, when will that be put into the budget? Thank you. Another comment without a location, another comment without a location, but generally these are in support of accessible playgrounds. Holly Salzberg of Wynwood, all playgrounds should be accessible for all our kids. Kids in surrounding neighborhoods use school playgrounds, and I'm sure we can all agree that children being outside, moving around freely, playing with their peers is important for their mental health and social well-being. Kim Lippitz of Narberth, again, at the general school board meeting, Ms. Shurak asked Mr. Herman to put playground accessibility on back burner based on asks for projects that should get priority. It is unclear what is higher priority than accessible playgrounds for elementary schools. Can anyone explain which project Ms. Shurak wanted to see prioritized first, as that was clearly a palpable issue at the general school board meeting, but the project Ms. Shurak was referring to was not referenced? Thank you. Holly Salzberg of Wynwood, thank you, Jason. Communication and community and key players in each area are important and wonderful and refreshing ideas. Michelle McGill of Ballackinwood, when can we budget funds to combat the achievement gap that LMSD hasn't been able to resolve for the last 50 years? Can we hire tutors to support Black and Brown students in honors and AP classes? We need to budget funds to have an actual plan to implement services to attach and decrease the achievement gap. And that is the end of the comment. The other comments were just saying, please read the comments. So we have done that.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Buckman. Is there any hands raised? No.
Sorry,
Okay.
no.
Okay. So I'll just mention to Michelle McGill, thank you for that comment about the tutors, and that was, I believe that came up at our last communication, and we'll have to we'll have to talk further about that and see where things are in the budget. And because I'm sure we all are concerned about closing the achievement gap or the opportunity gap, as it's called now. Now the rest of it's all about playgrounds. Mr. Lild, was there anything further you had to indicate about that?
Well, thank you, Mr. Heffmeister. And again, I hope I didn't jump ahead of proper protocol. It would have referenced everyone back to October 17th, which was the presentation that Mr. Copeland did. And again, I'm looking at the presentation right now, and I'm not going to say that it addresses every one of the very valid and important points raised in the comments. I am looking at a slide where it does state that our goals with playground upgrades is to have accessibility, not just on the playgrounds, but getting to from the playgrounds. That's also going to have to take some work with different layouts at different sites. And we want to develop future upgrades and replacements of playgrounds, because some of those are also reaching end of life, similar to roofs. But we want to develop our playgrounds going forward to ensure that products and spaces can be used comfortably by all people, regardless of their ability or preference. And we're referring to a concept called universal design, which we're hoping to go above accessibility and kind of promote an equitable environment. And we're starting to develop things that are in place at some schools, but not all, with different sensory type of playground equipment and things of that nature, which, truth be told, it wasn't built into the prototypical elementary school playground from 20 years ago. But that's where we as a district eventually need to be.
I'm just curious as to whether or not, I think after the last meeting, you kind of identified, you as well as Mr. Copeland had identified the different schools and the costs associated with it and had pictures. I think one of the questions that was asked was, could you go back and take a look at which schools were in more need than others at this point and kind of evaluate them from an administrative standpoint so that we can kind of move this forward? Again, as part of facilities and purchasing, our job is to gather all the information and then provide it to the board with a recommendation. So I think, kind of getting an idea from you as to what playgrounds we should focus on first and why, I think would be really helpful, to kind of continue moving this discussion forward, since there is such a need to do so.
So, if I'm understanding your question correctly, you're asking for the batting order, if you will. Because
I think that I don't know if I would say necessarily batting order. I just think that obviously, as much as I would like to have it done at every single playground immediately, I think that we need to evaluate. I think there are some schools that might have older equipment than others. Some that might have rubber matting, whereas others don't. So I'm just curious as to, have we looked at all of the different elementary schools that we have in the playgrounds and kind of evaluated, where we should start and, what your recommendation would be?
So I think that's a very way to describe, maybe a better terminology, be a prioritization list. And when I say that, we did take into consideration the year of installation, because obviously age is not the sole factor, but that is something that we have. We obviously know when each playground, and remember there's 14, 15 that were discussed. Condition, some are in better condition than others. Again, age is not the only clarifying factor. In terms of some of our equipment, it does have some level of inclusivity. I'm not going to say it has full inclusivity or the level of enhanced that we're looking for. And then certainly the surface is something that Mr. Copeland had identified, and we've put all of this together into a matrix, and it prioritizes those 15 different projects or 15 different locations based on priority, using those factors in a matrix, in a grid. I provided that to Ms. Schaefer. She has it, and I believe she shared it with the board leadership. I spoke to her this morning, and the document has not been shared with the rest of the board. And, that's something that she can certainly provide to you.
All right. Well, I think in the future, I mean, I don't want to go through politics, but that's a committee. That's not something that should be shared. I mean, it can be shared with the leadership. That's fine. But I think that, that type of information I think is really helpful for the facilities and purchasing committee. And the fact that we're at this meeting and, we're asking for this information, and we don't have it, I think is a little disappointing, because I think that would be really helpful to be able to share with the community, and to have an idea of where to go from here. So, hopefully that's something that's either shared with the community at some point, or at least shared. I don't know, Melanie, if you've received it, but I haven't seen that.
No, I haven't received it yet either. And it needs to be presented to the full board as well.
Mr. Herman, I'll pass along your concerns to Ms. Schaefer.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay,
I
thanks.
think Ms. Colbert has
Yes.
her hand raised.
Yeah. Is it okay if I go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Please.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for holding this meeting. I'm raising my hand. Obviously, I really feel strongly about the playgrounds being accessible. Can we get a better understanding? I understand it needs to go through the proper channels of timing, even if we don't know exactly which playground. I live right by South Ardmore Park, and they stood up a brand new playground within a 2-month time period. So our hope would be that for the 2025 school year, that would be something that could be put into effect. I guess what I'd like to understand is, obviously there's a bunch of passionate people on here advocating for playgrounds. So how can we help to move this along so there is in fact change at any of the Lower Merion playgrounds? What's the proper protocol?
Well, right now, I mean, being in the facilities and purchasing is a good spot to be for that. It's where things like to start. But the protocol right now, I don't know that we can move any faster than we are right now. Everything needs to be assessed. Everything needs to go through the proper channels. And I believe this is something that people understand is an important thing. I myself am an advocate a big advocate for people living with disabilities of all kinds. And my job is working to an organization that supports that. You have advocates on the school board who want this to move forward. What we need to do is I would say, whenever, actually is Mr. Orlando still on? Because we could talk about when is this on the budgeting side of things, because there's the budgets being set in place for the next year, and I believe said in March, April would be when that would be talked about. So that's something to join into that meeting. Watch for that on the committee meetings. I'm not sure. Jason, do you have anything to add?
No, just that I appreciate you coming and voicing your opinion. I reiterate that, coming to board meetings and coming to this and advocating for it and expressing your interest in it, I think is the best way to be an advocate for it. Yeah. And obviously we understand and appreciate the importance of playgrounds and accessible playgrounds at the schools, and that's what we're trying to get the information so that we can present this to the full board, and hopefully move forward with this.
Okay. And Mr. Lill was speaking to that. Ms. Schaefer is holding this said matrix of what they're proposing. Does she attend any of these meetings, or can we ask that she's at this next meeting?
She's normally at these meetings. It's just
Okay.
she had a conflict today and wasn't able to be here.
Okay. So is she?
She's
does
not
somebody bring her up
withholding
to speed
things
after
from
these meetings?
public.
I'm sorry,
She's not like withholding things that
Yeah.
you can't have. She's
Yeah.
the superintendent of the district.
Yeah.
It makes sense that there are things that are prepared for her
Of
that are
course.
not immediately disseminated.
That's not what I'm implying. I just wanted to understand.
I know. I just wanted to make that clear because she works incredibly hard and incredibly passionately for our district. And that is information that now that we know that has been prepared, that we can work on getting that information out. I just wanted to level set a little bit in terms of timeline, because you in your head are thinking 2 months. And I will just tell people that even if every single person had the desire and means, not to say that anybody doesn't, but that if it were decided, it still would not happen in that short of a time frame, because it's the kind of thing that needs to go be discussed, be evaluated, be prioritized, be put into the budget, go out for bid, be scheduled, and then happen. There's a lot of individual steps that happen on major capital projects because of the scale of the organization that we are. So
And-
I think that the likelihood that any one of these projects would be completed, I mean, I won't estimate a timeline. I'm just saying that even with zero roadblocks in the system, it's going to take longer than one would hope it would, just because that there are a lot of rules in the way that things are done in an organization that is under so many rules.
Yeah, no, I did project management for Macy's for a long time, so I totally appreciate the timelines. I just was trying to understand at the next meeting, which I assume these are held monthly, what can we expect? And I only referenced the timeline because I was amazed at how quickly that got set up. I know there's months and months of planning prior to that, but our goal is to help make this something that comes to life in 2025 for at least some of the elementary school playgrounds, just because we see how much children thrive in that environment.
Okay.
And
Great, I
Ms.
appreciate
Galish, I appreciate, South Elmer being brought up, and I always appreciate the opportunity to give a shout out to Township Parks and Rec, because they're a phenomenal
Yes.
department. And my children played at South Elmore, and one's now a college graduate, and the other one's a sophomore in college. So to see that equipment's being replaced, I can imagine it's probably they've gotten their money's worth. But as Ms. Kalish stated, we've been in communication with the township, and as a government entity as well. A lot of those plans they developed have been in the works. They're going through bid processes, and they're a phenomenal resource for us on a day-to-day basis, as well as some of the learning curve I'm sure they had with South Ardmore, and there are other parks. I was looking at their CIP, and they're definitely doing a great job, and they're definitely a very, very good ally for us, and a good
that's a great-
collaborator.
I completely agree. We're really
another
happy
place
with how it's
that would be great for you to be involved if you want to show up and make your voice heard in favor of this issue. If you wanted to show up to the Parks and Rec meetings for the township, or potentially commissioners meetings. I don't know. I'm not an expert on the structure of their meetings. I have enough school board meetings. I don't go to all the commissioners meetings as well. But it's good to advocate from different entities too, so that when we have the opportunity to work together, there is even more of that impetus to do so.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so
In
much.
the meantime, what we'll do is we'll reach out. I think you said, Mr. Little, that it was shared with Megan. So we'll reach out to Megan. We'll also reach out to the leadership, which I assume is Todd and Curry, find out and get a copy of that. And then we can also see if there's a way to share that, so we don't have to wait another month for it to be shared with the public. If that's something that can be shared with the community, maybe we can post that somewhere so that the community can see, and we can also start thinking about our next meeting and kind of moving this forward. What types of questions we want to ask, how we can kind of move this discussion forward so that we're gathering all this information.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Herman. We'd really appreciate that.
Jason, I'm sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand. Can I ask you a question, Jason?
Sure.
I'm
sorry, can you please state your
This
name?
is Michelle. This is Michelle McGill from Bala Kenwood.
Okay, thank
Sorry.
you.
Hi. So Jason, I just want to be clear on what you're asking them for that you didn't receive, because I missed that. You asked the district for something?
Yeah, no. So I think, and Mr. Lill, I haven't seen it, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what happened was Mr. Lill and Mr. Copeland had worked to put together a matrix of all the different school playgrounds and had prioritized the ones based on what they felt, based on age, based on accessibility, based on needs, where they would prioritize the playgrounds in renovations or fixing. And that was shared with Megan, as well as board leadership, which I assume is Todd, who's the vice president, and Curry, who's the president. Melanie and I, and Shana and Kimberly, who are on this committee, have not been provided with that. So what we were just asking for was if we could get a copy of that, so that we would know what Mr. Lill and Mr. Copeland had identified as prioritized. In an ideal world, we would have liked to have asked like how he came to those school class, what came to those playgrounds, and why those as opposed to others, and where, and then the next steps would have been like, well, where do we go from here? Unfortunately, we don't have that information, so it makes it a little bit more difficult to ask. But my hope is that we can get a hold of that. We can provide that hopefully to the community so you could see as well. And then as a community and as a board and as administration, we can kind of think of the questions we want to ask so that at the next meeting, we can kind of, we can make sure that we're asking those types of questions to move that discussion forward.
And were you expecting to have that prior to the meeting today?
I mean, I don't know. That's a hard question. I would just say that I think that anything that would help facilitate conversation about, any of the issues regarding facilities and purchasing, I think would have been helpful to have so that we could discuss it. And I think that if Mr. Lill and Mr. Copeland went through the effort of putting together this list as part of their work on the playgrounds, which we deeply appreciate everything that they've done, I think that it would have been helpful to have prior to the meeting so that, that us meaning Melanie, Shayna, Kimberly, and I, as well as the community, could see this matrix and that we could have a discussion about it and kind of figure out where to go from here.
But to be clear, Jason, we didn't know this existed before the meeting, so we couldn't have expected to have it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
it would have been nice, but
no, well, that's not factually accurate. When we had our pre-meeting, Mr. Lill had indicated that it existed, and Melanie and I had asked for it prior to this meeting. So we were aware of the matrix on Monday that it existed, and we had asked for a copy of it prior to this meeting. He said he was sharing it with Megan, and that we would find out about it.
Okay, so the reason I'm asking is because this seems to be a consistent theme with asking for information and or data and not being able to get it from the district, and the board is responsible for kind of holding the administration to task. So I'm happy to see that someone is requesting something and asking for timeframes, because I think that's the same exact thing that needs to be happening across the board, that when we ask for something, we get it and it's delivered to us in a way that is meaningful so that we can move things forward. So that's why I just wanted some clarity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle, for your comments.
And just for a little background, that is for information that is not available for the public, but is requested by the board, that is shared out to the full board from the administration when it is requested. And so, yes, a lot of our job is a public-facing job, but there is also work that takes place behind the scenes. Every committee has their leadership meets with their administrative liaison beforehand to set the agenda and review it, and background issues are being updated to the full board. So it's not like we're not asking for things or we're asking for things and they're not getting done on a regular basis. I just wanted to clarify that kind of information sharing is happening, just not necessarily in every single meeting.
And just to clarify the chain, if you will, the administration provides information to the superintendent, and that's protocol. That's the chain of command within our organization. I've been in school districts for 20 years in 2 different districts and various superintendents, and certainly out of respect for any of them, there's always been an understanding that we certainly have to keep the superintendent's office aware, because that just would not be fair to any superintendent or any of the ones that I've worked for at 2 different districts.
Thank you all for those. And so I have a couple of some more comments have come in, and also one that forgot to answer. Michelle Vessel of Gladwin had asked about the Arnold Field comment. But the Arnold Field lights. Now, yes, we know they've been improved, but right now we have no time frame for when they will need to be looked at on I believe as we get into budgeting and the facilities and purchasing, we're looking at where this will fall and in our 5-year plans. Mr. Lill, if you have anything to add to that.
Very accurate. I I'm not an attorney. However, I can certainly give you an update on where that agreement is, because as you know, Ms. Schaffmeister, various parties, multiple parties were a party to that. Wynwood Civic and one of the individual residents who was an intervener, they have signed the agreement. You as a school board approved it. I just was looking at that, but let's just say it was a couple of months ago, relatively recently. If I'm not mistaken, it was approved by the Board of Commissioners, I believe October of 2024, one of their meetings. The only body left or vote, if you will, that needs to be achieved, and again, that's just a matter of getting all the parties and the proper signatures. It needs to go before the zoning hearing board. And Ms. Schaffmeister, I've been keeping an eye on the township website, because I was looking to see which of their zoning meetings was going to pop up. They're also typically meet once a month, but not always. So it's definitely moving closer to the finish line in terms of autographs, if you will, for the various signatures.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lell. And and then there's a couple of more comments. I'll just read them for expand. Kim Lippitz in Narberth, agree with Michelle that money needs to be considered for possible tutoring. To all of those need to help close the achievement gap. Obviously, some of the programs we have invested money in are not producing results as referenced at the curriculum meeting. Are these funds for tutoring programs designed specifically for special classes, AP or otherwise, set aside at all? If what we are doing hasn't worked, and we certainly spend a lot of money, why not invest in tutoring, which showing some progress during Copeland era? I think Michelle's question is an important one. Hope this can be addressed across the committee and the curriculum. Right now, it was discussed at the curriculum meeting. I think this needs to be something that Ms. Schaefer needs to chime in on, that we all know that this is important. And there was a question of why that had stopped, and agreed, because we need to look at it. We are a district with a lot of resources, and we should be able to figure this out. And then we have Risa Murphy. I'm not seeing a field, but they're asking about there's no I'm not seeing that she's mentioned where she lives, but asking about middle school fields and the times and healthy options for indoor resources, recess rather than movies. And Holly Salzberg and Wynwood said transparency is so important. Kim Litznar, Michelle's question is on spot. Things are taking too long and too many fronts. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Michelle McGill. Okay, so that is the final comment for this meeting. If there is, I believe, thank you everybody for attending. And so we will have our next facilities and purchasing meeting is Thursday, January 23rd at 12 p.m. again on the Zoom call. And we look forward to having you all in attendance, and thank you all for coming. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.